Good evening, viewers. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Economic Briefcase. I'm your host tonight, Noah Japao. We have a very interesting guest today in the studio with me. We're going to be discussing a very interesting book authored by this individual, a very good friend, international relations and diplomacy expert, and an author. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
I want to call you Brother Anthony.
Please.
I'm used to calling you Brother Anthony.
Of course,
Ambassador,
of course.
welcome to the program.
I wouldn't get it any less. Thank you very much.
Ambassador, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. And, good evening to our viewers. And I must say, I am most grateful for the invitation, Brother Noah.
You're most welcome. So today, as we discuss the book, as we go into the details of the book and to see where the motivation comes from, when the ambassador was writing this book, let's look at the money markets first. Then we dive deep into digesting this book and other geopolitical issues that are happening in our current times. As we can see, there's a lot happening. When we look at first we'll look at the Russia-Ukraine war and how it's affecting the world, and now we see in West Africa, it's extending to that extent, and we'll see which position Zambia should take, or Africa as a whole. As geopolitics keep changing, it's like we're going back into a time where Africa was on the chopping board.
Exactly.
So let's look at the money markets.
Water is life. Each drop counts, and each must be cherished. Our tried and tested product meets all international standards. With our smart drip technology, we aim to deliver precision irrigation designed to reduce blockage and wastage, ensuring a high yield. RenGlow, your smart irrigation partner.
Today we are discussing this book, China in Africa, the Zambia Story, authored by Ambassador Anton Mukwita. Okay, so where did you get the motivation to write this book?
Once again, Brother Noah, I must say I'm most grateful for the invitation. I know how busy your schedule is, and I know how high-profile guests you get on this program. Back to the motivation for this book. While I was Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary for the Republic of Zambia in Germany between 2017 and 2021, I decided that because my background had been that of media, I'm a former editor-in-chief and former managing director of a newspaper, but I was thrust very quickly into diplomacy at the very highest level. I decided that despite the fact that I knew a little bit about international relations, I needed to actually study it. So I enrolled for a master's degree in international relations, and my thesis was The Rise of China in Africa, a Zambia case study. So when I got back, when I was recalled, like many others, after a change of government in 2021, I needed to fill in time productively. So I said, what do I do? A lot of people had been talking about China's rise for a long time, about the battle in the rise between China and the United States of America, and about how African countries, which are mineral rich like Zambia, had been caught in the middle. So I thought, instead of just leaving this discourse or this discussion to being pedestrian, since I had actually studied for it and written a thesis and passed that thesis, perhaps I could add to the body of knowledge. Perhaps I could add my 2 weight, my 2 pence, or my 2 cents, as they would say. So that's where the motivation was. The motivation was to try and ensure that there is at least a foundation others more intelligent, more clever than me can start from. They can use this as raw data, they can use this as literature review to discuss this ever-increasing important geopolitical issue and to make it more relevant to the Zambian, to the Zambian audience instead of just the international audience. Because most of the people, when you talk about China, they think it's just a big, monstrous thing, the United States of America. But in this book, I try to make it relevant to Auntie Agatha on the street and Uncle Joe the plumber.
Okay. I've had a chance to peruse the book. I'm yet to finish reading it.
Indeed.
And I've noticed that there is this is a book about China and Zambia. Mm-hmm. Okay. But I've noticed that there is a mention of the United States of America on several fronts.
Indeed.
Why is that? Because considering that this is a book about China and Zambia.
that is a very, very important question, Brother Noah. It's like, I think you know the saying that love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage. This I tell you, my brother, you can't have one without the other. This is the same situation with the United States and with China. The reason is pretty simple, but most people seem to gloss over it or ignore it, and I'm glad that you find it striking to ask that question. At the moment, currently, presently, instantaneously, the United States of America is the #1 global power economically and militarily. And according to studies, China, the People's Republic of China, which is also known as the World Factory, is #2 as far as the economy is concerned and as far as military might is concerned. But they are growing exponentially at a very fast rate. According to international studies, the People's Republic of China under President Xi Jinping, which has grown so much since 2012 when he took over from President Hu Jintao, is going to be #1 global power in economics and in military. Actually, some studies say as early as 2030. They already have made in China plan, what they're calling MIG 2025. So as the two giants playing for the top role, there is usually some countries that are caught in the middle. And Zambia, that's what this book, the China in Africa, the Zambia story, is, comes in. This is in a bid to try and answer your question of why the United States. As the United States struggles to remain #1, and as China finally keeps on rising, and experts say it's not a question of if, but it's simply when. It shall be #1. The United States, forget about it. Its days of might are over, according to international economic and military experts. Countries like Zambia, which are mineral resource, shall get caught in the middle. You know the saying that when elephants fight, the grass suffers. So in this case, we are not really suffering, but we have been caught in the middle, being Africa's second largest producer of copper and cobalt, second only to the Democratic Republic of Congo. We find ourselves in a situation where the Americans want our copper, cobalt, our lithium and manganese. We find the People's Republic of China looking for the same mineral resource which we have in abundance. As the world moves off what is called fossil fuels such as gasoline and diesel, and moving towards the electric vehicles. So this is one of the aspects where we find ourselves in the middle, the economic part. There is also the ideological part. Ideological values, there is religious values. Again, the West, indeed, influence. So we are caught in between this zone where the Western world, the Americans and its NATO allies, want us to embrace their values and their political system. And we are also caught in the middle of this part where the East, China in this case, will help us, but do not impose any conditionalities on how we live, how we love, how we laugh, and how we cry.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that we've seen a lot of Africa, let's say Russia Africa Summit. There was another one that was held in the United States.
Indeed.
That was earlier.
The America Africa Summit.
Yes, you know, it's like now the global community. It's like there's a gold rush going on.
You have used the right term.
Gold rush going on, and it's like everyone wants to a piece of Africa, or to see which piece of Africa a certain power will influence.
Indeed. It's there is a power tussle. I mean, it is like the scramble for Africa all over again. Except this time it's in terms of ideologies and the capital markets. In fact, that's what it's been about for a very long time. And I am glad that you mentioned about there was President Joe Biden at the beginning of the year had an America-African summit in Washington, D.C. And just this month, we saw, last month, we saw a very, very important Russia-Africa summit in the serene, cultural city of St. Petersburg, hosted by President Vladimir Putin, where 17 African heads of states attended. Initially, the entire African heads of states were invited, but then that's probably a story for another day. And we know that there is also the Japan-African summit. So there is all these summits where the Western world is scrambling, literally stepping all over each other to get the support of Africa, to get the support of Zambia, basically because we are the last bastion, we are the last frontier of minerals, we are the last frontier of clean air, we are the last frontier of clean water, we are the last frontier of lots of things that have run out in the West, and there is this overriding or overarching need for the West to try and get a bit of us, which in my view should make our leaderships in our individual countries realize our importance and not let ourselves be influenced or being used in an ideological sense. But we must start creating our own niche on how we can create wealth, how we can reduce poverty, how we can grow our economy using this sudden rush interest, this gold rush as you used it, as you said. Mm-hmm. How will we make sure that we reap the maximum profits from our abundant cobalt, from our abundant manganese, from our abundant sugilite, as the rich West comes in? Are we going to let them come in like they did pre-colonial and just rip off everything, get the raw materials and leave us hanging dry, dig holes, leave them open for us to fill up? I think this is a challenge this is a gauntlet I would like to throw to our leadership, that we must work out ways that let's make hay while the sun shines. This rush will not end, and these resources that China, these resources that Russia, these resources that the United States of America are looking for are only with us now. Let us utilize them to ensure that our children and our children do not get the wrong end of the stick like we did.
So now it's like people are assuming that now there's need to take sides.
Indeed.
So with your experience or with your research as you were doing, writing this book, what position or role should Zambia play, or other African countries? What position should they take when it comes to handling this situation that's going on now?
For me, myself, personally, and that's another interesting question that you asked, Brother Noah, is, from my experience and from my education in international relations, in geopolitics, being an ambassador, being an editor-in-chief, being an author, my advice, actually, my cautionary advice is, let us not, as Zambia, inherit other countries or other powers' enemies. Let us also not, as Zambia, inherit other people's friends. let us have our own strength to say, hey, Noah is my friend, and the reasons he's my friend is because I value this characteristic about him, because I value this religion about him, because I value this business partnership that we have. It would be total, misfortune, in my humble view, if we decided to start openly taking sides. It's never a very good idea in diplomacy to openly take sides, because you do not know when things change for the better or for the worst. And if you had openly taken a side to isolate one particular power or one particular ideology, when things change, it will be very hard for you to walk back. So for instance, today the United States is number one globally, economic and militarily. In 2025 and 2030, it will be China. That is a fact. That is a proven and studied fact. China will be number one.
And I've
so
seen
what
in
are you
this
going
book,
to do? Yes.
You paint the picture as though the United States is a declining power.
It is a declining power.
On the global stage.
I can fall on the knife. It is historic. I love the United States a lot. It is the first country, actually, as a young journalist, I traveled to. I mean, after winning the International Visitor Leadership Program, it was the first country I opened that opened my international doors. But the time for the United States is gone. China is coming. The red dragon is roaring and roaring high. So we should be friends with both the United States and the People's Republic of China. That's what diplomacy is. Diplomacy is we should be talking to everybody. We should not openly take sides, in my view, of whom we support and whom we hate. There is nobody holding it. We should not allow, actually, there is somebody holding a gun from time to time when there is the power struggles, but we should not allow ourselves to be triggered by a gun that is being held by one power on top of the other one, because when things change along the way, we will be the ones to regret.
So when you paint the United States as a declining power in your book, is it springing from the belief that all empires, great empires, have to die at some point?
You have taken the words straight.
You know, we see the Roman Empire, the British.
You should have written this book. All empires rise and they fall, starting from what you have mentioned, the Roman Empire at a certain point spread from Rome to Cairo to Alexandria. Greeks is the same thing, which is why actually in this book you will find there is a description in there called the Thucydides trap. So the Thucydides theory is basically when one empire is rising, it causes ripples for the other one. In this case, when China is rising, it's causing a lot of discomfort for the United States of America. You've mentioned the British Empire. The British Empire was so big that at a certain point, they said the sun never sets on the British Empire. Because, I mean, it was sunshine in Zambia, in India, or different time zones. But it started breaking down when small colonies, I think initially there were 16, started fighting for independence and have now eventually become the United States of America. The British tried to fight it twice. Actually, there was the independence revolution, there was the War of 1812, and eventually they just gave up. And the British Empire declined to one tiny little kingdom held only probably by the Queen and her children. And there came in the United States of America. And the United States of America came over and became stronger after World War I, World War II. They started printing the dollar became the main currency. All that stuff is discussed in this book, and thanks for you to bring it up.
And are we actually now in a process of fighting for economic freedom as Africa?
We should. I don't think we are doing enough. Of fighting over this question, the important question that you have raised. I don't think we are fighting enough. We still remain net exporters. We still remain heavily dependent on international debt from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. We still remain, emboldened to conditionalities from the West. and yet we have the largest amount of mineral resources. Copper, cobalt, Zambia, for instance, shouldn't be getting money from the IMF, in my view, personally. Zambia shouldn't be having high prices of maize or meal, in my view, because we have abundant mineral resource, we have abundant land. So we are not doing enough. In order to answer your question, we are not doing enough for to attain economic freedom. But it is work in progress.
I was listening to a speech by President Ramaphosa. That was last week. He mentioned about how Africa exports dirt and soil, only to be sold the finished product from the soil that it has exported.
Exactly.
While it's exporting these raw materials in its
in its raw form.
In its raw form. Your answer just reminded me of
President Cyril, and he was so right. He also reminds me of the same concern that was raised by President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, who was lamenting the fact that the largest coffee producers, an industry worth more than $500 billion, the largest coffee producers such as Uganda and other African countries only get about maybe $1 billion of that. And the ones that do not even grow the coffee bean, such as the United States of America, Switzerland, and others in Europe, make more money. I mean, let's just say, for argument's sake, out of the $500 billion industry, $400 billion goes to the West, which do not produce the coffee. To bring it back home, it's our copper industry. We are Africa's second largest copper producer. The electric vehicle industry is coming on board, and I want our beloved Zambian viewers this evening to take note. The electric vehicle industry expected to peak at more than $800 billion by 2030. We still do not know how much we are going to gain from that. We still do not know what plan we have put in place to ensure that we reap maximum resources to grow the economy and to sustain over a long period of time, to grow beyond 2% or 3% or 5%, because everybody knows that at a place where we are, where poverty levels are above 50%, we cannot expect to remove people off the poverty rate at 2% and 3%. Those that have grown, such as China, over the last 30, 40 years, they have had higher dreams and higher expectations.
There was a talk about a battery plant between Zambia and Congo. There was an agreement that was signed.
There was an agreement. I think it received a lot of flack, because up to now, many Zambians do not know. I do not know, for instance, and I am supposed to be a well-informed person. There was an MOU that was signed between the United States of America, the Republic of Zambia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo for enhancing the electric vehicle industry, given the resources that we have. I think the opposition and civil society have been up in arms demanding to know what kind of value addition this will lead. This
I think prior to that, there was another agreement just between Zambia and Congo.
Indeed.
Then right after, there was an invitation by the United States of America, where Zambia and
Congo, an MOU was signed. I think
that's where the issue came about, where people are saying, okay, there's already an MOU that was signed between Zambia and Congo. Why then now go and sign another one with in the presence of the United States?
Indeed. Like I said, to humbly answer your question, is I have very limited, if no information at all. And I think sometimes it is important to appreciate the fact that you do not know everything. I think civil society and members of the opposition have tried to say the government should let us know what the contents of the two MOUs are and how we are going to gain from that. I can tell you one thing. I have been one of the proponents, the first proponents of the electrical vehicle enhancement industry. When I was ambassador in Germany, I actually traveled to the BMW plant just before COVID shut down the globe. I traveled and I had very high level meetings with BMW, which is one of the largest motor industries in the whole world, whose GDP is probably 10 times higher than the entire country of Zambia. And we had discussions. The discussions I had with BMW was that they should have come probably here with the help of the government and establish factories, get into a multi-facility economic zones where there would be not just us exporting the copper, the cobalt, the manganese, the lithium, and other minerals that are relevant for firing up the electric vehicles, that we should be adding value. Those discussions were there. I had done reports. Anybody can check with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I think they eventually did go to the Ministry of Finance, but I don't know whether they have been incorporated in the two MOUs that you have mentioned. But my fulcrum, my thrust at that moment was to ensure that we did not export the raw materials. It was to ensure that we added value right here. To go back to the issue you mentioned about President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, lamenting that we send out the pay dirt copper, that's what it's called, pay dirt, you know, while oil I think is called black gold. You are the people in the money markets. Yes, so I do agree. My problem is, we know what the problem is.
And we don't want to act on it.
No, yeah, we actually even know the solutions. But we do not seem to be acting on it. We know the solutions. We know that we will get richer, we will lift more people out of poverty, we will create more jobs for our people if we added value, if we increased our shares in the mines, but we do not do it. We know that we should not allow somebody to let us inherit their enemies. Your enemy's enemy is my friend, things like that, but we still go along, so we do not seem to have a path of our own, and that's the reason.
Speaking of enemies or camps, and now we've seen that there is the rise of BRICS, and there's a section in your book where you talk about BRICS.
That's a very important point to raise.
What about BRICS?
What about BRICS? What about BRICS? Everybody's talking about what about BRICS? Just 2 days ago, I was reading an international article which was saying that this month, by the way, this month there'll be a BRICS summit in South Africa. By the way, you know, because you are a lecturer, you are a professor in economics and accountancy, so you know what BRICS is. But for the sake of our viewers, those that may not know, I know lots of them know much more than we do, but for those that do not know, BRICS is an acronym actually for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These are the first 5 founding members of BRICS. BRICS was founded as a motivation to move away from depending too much on the Bretton Woods institutions such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, and to lessen as much as possible the use of the dollar. It's basically the petrodollar, you know, I mean, it's basically to say we should not have one, let me call it a controller, you know, mode of doing business, but we must have alternatives. So BRICS came up, and now the interest in BRICS is rising every day. It is believed, or rather it has been stated from the BRICS headquarters in South Africa, that an additional 70 countries have applied to join BRICS. What this does is it weakens the International Monetary Fund, which is controlled by the United States. It weakens the World Bank, which is controlled by the United States. It also weakens the dollar because already these countries have already started trading in their own currencies. China is already able to buy gas and oil from Russia using its own yuan. India is able to buy its own gas and oil from Russia using its own money. And also these BRICS countries are also not listening now to the so-called sanctions of the West. So you can see when I was talking about that the power of the United States is declining because the BRICS countries, like it or not, they comprise more than a third of the 8 billion population of the world. The most populous nation in the world is China with 1.4 billion people, followed by India. They are all in the BRICS. So as far as business is concerned, you can see that if I was giving advice to Zambia, me myself personally, as a person of interest, I am a person of interest because I'm a citizen of this country. I would say if we have not put in our application to BRICS, this is the time that we should do that, because this is a gravy train which if we let go, we may live to regret. And I have put that in the book so that it's not just, like talking. I am laying a claim on it that it is important that we should join Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa in having an alternative. I have not said we should dump the IMF and the World Bank, but if we can have alternatives, it's like the way you do compare.
It reminds me of news coming out of Finland now,
Indeed,
saying that Finland is about to cut aid to certain African countries because of their support of certain organizations,
of Russia,
countries,
certain organizations.
Yes. Now, won't that have an effect on? Considering that we are heavily dependent on
if you have noticed, many African countries now just don't care. We were talking about what's happening in West Africa. It's unfortunate that we have seen some sort of an increase in coups coming on because they should never be justified. But I was reading an international news article where the states were saying they were going to have sanctions on one of the African countries that has recently undergone a coup, and the leader said, yes, I think the leader said that, you know what, we don't care, just take your money to your homeless people in America, we don't care about it. But BRICS is that same animal that the United States, that the Western allies such as Finland, which you have so ably mentioned, which is saying, look, your sanctions won't work for us. So for instance, one of the ways the United States and its NATO allies, the 31 NATO allies, the European Union thought would, and now I digress because you have mentioned the conflict between Russia and Ukraine at a certain point. They thought the war would end very quickly because they would have sanctions. And and Russia would be crippled. But that has not been the case, and it starts a little bit in the book. That has not been the case because China said, look, America, you have your own problems. I have my own people whom we have to feed. The largest reserves in the whole world, we shall buy it. India said the same thing. And the other countries said the same thing. Saudi Arabia and others. Who begins to gain? Russia started to gain much more from the sanctions than the people that had imposed the sanctions, because gas, and I've lived in Europe for almost 10 years, gas prices have gone up exponentially because they're no longer getting cheap gas from their source in Russia. They now have to get it through another circle, and it pushes the prices up. Okay. So as more of these BRICS countries come up and start defying the International Monetary Fund, which is led by the United States, they start defying the World Bank, led by the United States, they start trading in their own currencies, in the yuan, in the ruble, in the rupees, we may see, you can do the numbers.
Did you hear Ruto speak about trade between Kenya and other countries. You mentioned that why should we use the dollar if we're buying products or goods from, for example, Uganda?
Exactly.
Why should we use the dollar?
Indeed. I heard that, and it goes back. I'm glad you brought it home. You brought it much closer to home than I did, because I was talking about trade between Russia and China in yuan and rubles. I was talking about trade between between Russia and India in rupees and rubles. And now President William Ruto, the new president of Kenya, one of the strongest in economy in Africa. You see, there is a questioning of all these world. There is a changing world order. To use the words of Yale trained professor, very renowned, you can find him on the internet, Professor Richard Wolff. I'll send you some links. He's been talking about de-dollarization and the decline of the empire. He runs a not-for-profit organization called Democracy at Work.org. You can find it there. He has been talking of how this is going to be to affect the world order, and how the world right now has been divided in two, now more than ever. And this is discussed also in the book when we're talking about the Thucydides trap. The world is now, economically especially, and geopolitically divided in two. There is the United States, the declining United States. I have to keep on saying that. With its Western allies, and then there is the rise of China and others through BRICS. That is a clear division. Many Western pundits and analysts are now putting it clearly that there is this deep division, and you have seen this divide grow even bigger after the conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
So, just a summary on this book.
Indeed.
Why should Zambians take interest to read this book?
Well, firstly, because I wrote it.
Definitely.
But most importantly, because this issue of the rise of China in Africa has been peddled in the Western media as a relationship which is predatory. The Western media and Western analysts have painted China and Chinese people as predatory, especially as trade is concerned. They have said it very, very openly. The Mr. Bolton, the former security advisor to former president of the United States, Donald Trump, actually one time made a public statement that China was giving predatory loans, choking Africans, and he singled out Zambia as that country. That was in my thesis, and it's in this book.
Is it true?
It's not true. He actually lied about figures. He said that China, at that time when I was doing the thesis, had choked Zambia with a $20 billion debt. Very largely misinformed. I was an ambassador then, and I knew very well that our debt before the close of COVID, our international debt was only about $11 billion. And our debt to China alone was about $3 billion. It has gone up exponentially, doubled to about $6 billion. So he lied, and he was called out by State House anyway. There is a Minister of Foreign Affairs of China. He got tired of this. China has been exercising a lot of quiet diplomacy for a very long time.
Especially in the recent times.
But recently they have been talking. You mentioned the China-Russia, you mentioned the United States Africa Summit, where again that issue of predatory debt was raised. And Mr. Qin Gang, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of China, eventually had to come up and say, you know what, stop distorting facts. I have forgotten, Debt Justice, yes, an international debt monitoring organization, independent, not for profit. Debt Justice has actually established that African countries owe more money to the Bretton Woods institutions than they owe. This is a fact. But when the Western media puts out their stories, and you know they are stronger than everybody, you know, for them news is like Hollywood. They have honed it to a level where if they say China is bad, people don't want to go to China. If they say Russia is bad, it's the devil, and Putin is the pariah, people don't want to even find out the reason. But that's the reason I'm trying to answer your book. Reading this book is this is one of the reasons why people should read these books, because what I put in here is verifiable, it is peer reviewed, it's not a rumor. When they tell you that the Chinese are bad, when they come to Zambia, they do this and that, this book is there to say that this is not the case. This book also does not say China is perfect, no. This book does talk about Chinese managers who have shot at Zambians. This book does talk about Chinese companies that have resulted into deaths for Zambians. But this book also does talk about Zambians that have killed Chinese. This book also does talk about the United States and how they have put a gun to Zambian leadership and twisted them to follow certain ways. This book is not flattering everybody. It's not flattering anybody. It takes the interest of Zambia. Indeed, I mean, it leaves you to make your own decision, you know, and as a former editor-in-chief and published author, that's what we try to do. We do not try to choke in people like the way the Western media would do, like the way the CNN would do, the CBS, the ends, you can mention them. I'm never scared of mentioning them because they already come up with their own story and they want you to believe that narrative. But this one talks about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the United States, the good, the bad, and ugly of China, the good, and bad, and ugly of Zambia. Then you should make up your own mind. And I must thank you personally for having taken an interest in getting a copy for yourself. I would have given you one, but giving you one,
we need to support. We need to support. You know, a lot of resources go into
publishing, especially self-publishing.
A book. So where can our viewers find this book? Where can they?
This book can be found. It came out. It went live online on Amazon on April 24th. At a certain point, it has actually been among the top 100 African geopolitical books since it went live on Amazon. It's also on Take a Lot. Take a Lot is like the South African Amazon. It's a big market. Amazon has more than about 36 million subscribers, but 4 million of them are in Zambia. I mean, are in Africa. Then eventually, it was printed, with the support. I did not want to compromise on the quality, so it was printed in Europe, high quality, with a friend of mine I met a long time ago when I was in Sweden as acting head of mission. So we printed. His name is Taori Beck. I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning him. So we finally printed in Estonia, very high quality, and shipped the book over to Zambia. Right now, for any Zambian looking to get the book, it's available countrywide on in bookstores like Bookworld, yes, Bookworld, East Park, Grey Matter. Yeah, it's available. It's one of the reasons we hesitated to talk about it so much before it was available. It's available also at a very it's a not-for-profit book. It's almost like an academic piece, which is most useful for people like yourselves who are professors. It's very important for people in university libraries, government departments, and people who are interested in international relations, and people who are just interested in getting facts instead of rumors. Oh, Chinese are bad, Americans are bad, oh, Russians are bad. You can get something you can verify on because somebody sunk their teeth into studying it and presenting it as a study, a scientific study. Yeah.
Any last words for our viewers as we close?
The last words for our viewers, 3 words. Buy my book. That is the last word. But as I thanked you for having supported me by purchasing a copy, I would also like to thank, there are some organizations such as Ngandu Consulting, Brother Abel Ngandu, such as Brother Chanda Katotobwe, such as Radisson Blue, that got in to say and buy into an idea that they had not even seen at all. Because like you said, publishing is very, very expensive.
That's very good.
Much as I used my own personal resources, paying editors, paying graphic artists, paying printers, I still needed, even up to now, I still needed some help. So if you can buy my book, then maybe we can have resources to do a volume 2, a volume 3, with the help that the support that you have given.
When do we launch? Because the first volume has to be launched.
I know. That's why I'm saying buy my book so that we can raise some resources to launch. We should have launched this week actually, but I had to wait for the book to be flown into the country for us to plan a launch. Okay. So one of my supporters, I had to write them that the book is now in for a venue. So now that they know that the book is in, they'll look at the slot. You know, if you want to do a launch, it's very, very important that you choose the right time and you choose the right place. Because this is a book, we are not going to charge people. I want people to come for free and get a book. But also for that, then they need to have easy access to the venue. You will be the first one to know.
Definitely.
And I am hoping that you could call me, on your very widely followed program, yourself and Dr. Lubinda Hawazoka. You are doing a very great job. Then I can come and talk about the launch date and the venue.
No problem. You are most welcome.
Thank you.
You've been watching the Economic Briefcase on Camnet TV. Camnet TV, not just another channel. Make sure to join us next week for yet another interesting topic. And till then, it's bye-bye from me and my guest, Ambassador Anthony Mukwita. Good evening.
Good evening.